Off the coast of Broward County, a frantic mayday call broke the silence of the radio waves. A boater reported that his 22-year-old pregnant wife had vanished from the deck of their cabin cruiser in the dead of night. The missing woman was Anita Lopez Keane. She had been married for exactly 3 months. To her friends and family, the terror unfolding on that dark ocean was impossible to reconcile with the glowing, newly pregnant bride they knew. Anita's family had emigrated from Cuba to Miami in 1971. She possessed a natural, magnetic energy, taking office jobs while modeling on the side, all to build the foundation for a big family of her own. For her, that domestic life was the culmination of the American dream, and she seemed to have found the perfect partner in 33-year-old Michael Keane. A successful salesman pushing commercial neon signs started South Beach, Michael played the role of Prince Charming to perfection, wooing Anita with romantic dinners, a nice car, and the promise of absolute financial security. But that fairy tale evaporated the moment Michael made his call to the Coast Guard. The affluent life they were building was swallowed up by an empty stretch of the Atlantic Ocean. Within hours, the United States Coast Guard deployed to the approximate search area, roughly 15 miles offshore. This top-down view illustrates the massive grid system the Coast Guard uses to hunt for missing persons in open water. To find one person in millions of square miles of featureless ocean, rescue teams rely on a rigid mathematical matrix. By charting current speeds, historical weather patterns, and real-time radar data, investigators run equations that systematically eliminate specific zones of the grid. If a sector lacks the variables necessary to support human survival, they mark it off and narrow the search area. They utilized helicopters, boats, and their most advanced mathematical modeling for 4 agonizing days, but the search yielded absolutely zero physical evidence. No debris, no clothing, no Anita. The operation was officially suspended. The total failure of the matrix search created a chilling statistical void. In the calm waters of the Atlantic, a body missing for 4 days typically surfaces or is located within the predicted drift zones. When Anita remained invisible, the investigation was forced to look past the water and back at the events on the boat. 3 full years passed. The investigation stalled out entirely, leaving Anita's parents physically and emotionally devastated by the lack of closure. Then, an investigator at a life insurance company in Orlando received a startling phone call. A relative of Michael's, Matthew Keane, demanded a $50,000 payout in exchange for information proving the missing person case was actually a homicide. Matthew told authorities that Anita's disappearance was never an accident. It was a premeditated execution, entirely orchestrated by her own husband. Armed with this testimony, detectives immediately reopened the file and brought in Vince Mabberry. Vince was Michael's longtime friend, the third-wheel roommate who lived with the newlyweds, and the only other person on the boat that night. Faced with a renewed investigation, Vince broke down and confessed. He had kept his mouth shut because he was deeply indebted to Michael, who had lent him money, bought his car, and explicitly threatened to kill Vince's grandparents if he ever went to the police. Once the informant's greed overrode the roommate's fear, the entire facade collapsed. The authorities finally had a clear view of the killer's actual timeline. Michael Keane's motive was terrifying in its simplicity. He wanted to retire by the age of 40. To hit that financial goal, he planned to court a trusting young woman, marry her, take out a hefty life insurance policy, and arrange an accident. The cracks in the relationship were visible early on. Despite his affluent image, Michael was remarkably stingy. When Anita eagerly planned a large, traditional Cuban wedding, he forced her to settle for a brief, bare-bones ceremony with a notary. This chart visualizes the stark contrast in Michael's spending. He routinely refused to buy basic clothing and bottles for his unborn child, yet at the exact same time, his wallet opened wide to finalize a top-tier $200,000 life insurance policy. With the policy secured, Michael began workshopping logistics. According to Vince, the original plan involved scouting high-rise buildings and pushing Anita off a balcony. Michael eventually discarded the high-rise plan due to a lack of unobserved access. He settled on the boating accident because it offered the same result with far less public exposure. Michael looked at Anita's earnest desire for a family and saw nothing but a vehicle for his own profit. He used her genuine affection as camouflage to execute a cold, calculated financial transaction. Equipped with the exact details of the conspiracy, deputies secured a warrant and tracked Michael down to arrest him for first-degree murder. They found him living in a different Florida city, operating under an assumed name, and already engaged to a brand-new fiancée. And the environment he was building was identical to the one he had left behind. Michael had moved a new third-wheel roommate into the house and had already started pressuring his new bride to sign a fresh set of life insurance policies. Michael Keane operated with a cold, predatory consistency. Even with a homicide investigation looming back in Broward County, he was already laying the groundwork to repeat his lethal financial scheme in a new city. 3.5 years after the incident, Michael finally stood trial. Prosecutors completely dismantled his original Mayday story, replacing it with the harrowing reality of Anita's final moments. Under the cover of darkness, Michael crept up behind his pregnant wife and shoved her into the open Atlantic. He didn't reach out to help. Instead, he pulled the boat away and slowly circled her in the black water, watching as the woman who loved him drowned. It took very little time for the jury to see the truth. They convicted Michael Keane of first-degree murder, and the judge sentenced him to life in prison. The sheer cruelty of the plot devastated Anita's family. They spent years holding on to the fading hope that she had somehow survived, before finally accepting her fate and honoring her life with a White Dove memorial. Michael Keane achieved his retirement behind bars. Anita's family ensures her legacy survives as a vibrant, loving keystone, far outlasting the cruelty of the man who tried